Hey, what's up, everybody? Corey Knowles here from Armchair Rockstar. We're super stoked today to introduce to you the first episode of our latest project here on the site, Rock and Roll What Ifs. Myself, Armchair Rockstar staff, along with special guests along the way as we do these. We'll basically come on here and we'll chat and debate one wild hypothetical rock and roll question. Today, we decided to go straight for the low-hanging fruit, and we're going to discuss what if Kurt Cobain didn't die. Could be interesting. First, though, before we get into that, let's walk around the group and say hi. I'm Corey first. I have been involved with Armchair Rockstars since we came up with an idea in a hotel room in Vegas one year, and that was probably 2018. And it's been live and dead, and live and dead, and live and dead, and now we are live again, and hopefully doing more than we've ever done before, and we're trying to have a lot of fun with it. So, I'd like to introduce you to partner Shane Brisson. Shane, say hello.
Hey everybody, I'm Shane, also known as the other guy if you visit the website. Like Corey said, I've been involved since 2021. It's been fits and starts since then, and we finally got our shit together, and here we are, presenting to you our first podcast. Website's live, and we're trying to improve it every day. So have us a visit. Pass it over to Aaron.
So, Corey, I think some of the best and the worst ideas have been created in Vegas hotel rooms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and at the time, I'm not sure whether it's the best or the worst. You know, the whole idea was we wanted to get into this whole, we wanted to cover music gear, which is a big thing. It was a big part of all of our lives. It's a big part of every one of us. But along the way, we also found ourselves kind of having a passion for young rock and roll that isn't getting out there, and old rock and roll, the stuff we listen to every day, the stuff we talk about and bounce back and forth to each other in text chats, and just felt like, why not share that with everybody? And you fellas have been a big part of that.
Yes, sir. So what's up, guys? I'm Aaron. I am an amateur musician. I am a professional drinker, and I am an adequate music journalist. Happy to be here.
That's what we shoot for here, adequacy. We're not after the best. We can't afford the best. So what we serve with is we try to be okay. All right.
That's always my standard.
So let's dive into this Kurt thing here. Kurt died. Oh, what was it? 1994, Seattle. Suicide. We'll get into that a little later, maybe. I guess my first question is, would Nirvana still be playing, or would they have fizzled out by now? I mean, would they still be a thing at all? You guys have any thoughts?
It's a great question. So first of all, I think Dave Grohl was an ambitious guy from the beginning.
Okay.
Nirvana was the biggest band he could get in at the time. He was already a professional musician. I'm sure he was writing songs in the back of the van or wherever, the back of the plane, wherever they were, and he was gearing up to do Foo Fighters no matter what. I'm not sure he would have stayed there forever, and I don't know that Nirvana would have the same success without him.
It's a good question. I feel like, much like you said about Dave, most.
Yeah, we've got some further discussion about Dave too.
Yeah,
going down the list. So it's kind of funny that he popped up first. Not to interrupt you, Corey, but
you're right. It's interesting.
We're getting a little,
that's into Dave Grohl.
Yeah, I mean, here's how I like to think is maybe they would have seen a resurgence with some of these newer punk bands coming up. You talked with Bad Nerves, you got to see that show, Corey. Maybe they would have seen a resurgence, but I 100% agree with Aaron about Dave Grohl was an ambitious guy. I don't know his background like Aaron does, but we'll talk about it in a bit.
Yeah,
the projects he got involved in, and
I remember
those have happened.
Yeah, Dave Grohl was going to become a rock and roll frontman regardless. I tend to agree with that. It was in his DNA. And Nirvana it was a little different at the time of Kurt's death. It's my understanding they had been, I won't say incommunicado, but had canceled a tour. There'd been this overdose that Aaron, you and I talked about leading up to this conversation here. And, where they may have been on the verge of a split already at that point. Sometimes those bands that come out of nowhere and they blow up that quick and that hard, quite often they fizzle out as hard as they start, but absolutely, I think by now, some 30 years later, we'd have absolutely seen Nirvana play again at some point. I think they would have been a band for the contiguous 30 years that have passed since then? I don't know. I feel like Dave would have wanted to go off and do his own thing. I even feel like Kurt might have wanted to do his own thing because Kurt had some interesting side interests.
Well, that's a good segue, Corey, because would they have stayed focused on grunge, or would they have branched out as Nirvana? Yeah. Would they have explored a different genre? They had the MTV Unplugged sessions.
Yeah.
Would they have Pearl Jam? Didn't Pearl Jam also do some acoustic stuff?
Pearl Jam's done some.
So
kind of floated around.
So to you guys, would they have branched out or stayed true to grunge?
Well,
Aaron's ready for that question.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass that one to him.
So, I know I'm taking it away from Kurt, who is supposed to be the main focus here, but you have to talk about Pat Smear, right? When he joined the band, he added a new dynamic. And I know I saw in some interview where Kurt was saying he was so happy that he didn't have to do the lead guitar and be the front man. To have Pat in there, I think he would have been a staple in the band moving forward. And he does, he brings a different dynamic to it. So I think that would have played into the direction of the band moving forward. So if you look at it, like, despite all of the infighting and Kurt's addiction and all the bullshit associated with it, the musical direction was in an upward trajectory for me. Because, so, and I may be wrong about this. Please tell me if I am. But so Dave Grohl joins the band.
It's opinion, dude. It's, how do you feel? It's not necessarily right or wrong. So that's cool.
These are straight. These are straight facts. Like, Dave Grohl joins the band in 1990. Right. So the first album that he played on was Nevermind.
Correct. Right. Yeah, he was not on Bleach.
Okay. Right. Or any of the songs on Incesticide?
I can't say. That's a good question. I'll have to look. Probably someone in the comments will know before I ever get to look.
Sorry about my lack of knowledge on Incesticide.
No, I pass. I know what I know, and that's out of my knowledge range.
Same.
So if he joins the band in 1990, Nevermind was a comet. I mean, it was like a comet hitting Earth. It was huge. It was the biggest album of potentially the entire decade. And then we've got In Utero, which built on the success that they had, and it created, like, they had new dynamics in it. It seems like they were maturing as a band. And when you have Pat Smear in there as well, who knows what they could have created together.
Oh, I agree. The music definitely matured over the years, looking at it going from Bleach toward In Utero. I mean, there's a definite shift in the paradigm there that's interesting. But Aaron, something I'm curious about is an interview we talked about where Kurt made a comment about electronic music and new wave.
Yeah, so on YouTube you can find it, and it says rare interview. It's not so rare because it's all over the internet, but
right.
1994, I believe, is one of the last interviews that Kurt ever did. He was talking about grunge and the direction of the band, and he said that he appreciated new wave. He wanted to add more pedals, more effects, potentially synthesizers into the music. So it could have gone a more poppy direction, I've always said Kurt has a pop sensibility to him. He grew up on Beatles records. He grew up on, all the records that were in his parents' house. So even with that edge that Nirvana always had, and like growing up in the beginning of grunge, the reason they did so well, whereas some of the other Seattle bands didn't, is because he had that pop sensibility. And I feel like he may have leaned into that more as time went on.
That's possible. I would also say, and someone's going to kill me for this, that if Nirvana was going to go electronic, I think In Utero was a perfectly fine ending.
I would have liked to have seen what he was doing.
I'd listen.
Because would he have leaned into that? Would he have leaned into the industrial edge then?
Ooh.
Okay.
Good point.
So, let's move it that way a little bit. Would he have leaned into that? Because
would he have gone a little more Ministry and a little less EDM?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I would argue probably.
Maybe grunge was wearing on him though, and like Aaron said, picking up on that pop sensibility would have went the other way.
Interesting.
So could you see Kurt as the front man of 9 Inch Nails? What would that be like?
Don't know that I can.
I'm picturing him screaming head like a hole.
No, I can't see that.
He'd have handled Closer well.
Yeah.
I can absolutely hear him screaming about the things he'd do to an animal. But yeah, I can't picture him at the front of
he would have done Dirt well. Was it Dirt?
Yeah, and he's absolutely not a Lane Staley. Like Lane Staley was like a vocalist. Kurt was
negative.
Kurt's vocals are cool, but I would not call him like a singer. You know what I mean? Where like Lane Staley had that. Here's another thing. When Kurt died, grunge kind of died too. I mean, 94 was about the end of that. If he he does, however it happens that he's not dead either it's not a suicide or whatever, or he kicks his drug addiction, whatever the case may be. What becomes of grunge? Does it stay growing? Was it already kind of slowly starting to die at that point anyways? Because I mean, the life of grunge is like a grand total of 4 years in the history of the universe. And it's interesting that we still discuss it at all, as short a window as we're talking about. But is that like
we had a lot of really good bands come out of that era too?
Yeah, I mean, does that extend the careers of? I mean, not the careers, but the heyday of Aliceinchains, Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, Mudhoney.
Mudhoney, yeah. See, there's
Mudhoney made you smile. I saw it.
Yeah,
I thought of it in a minute.
I love Mudhoney. I like those guys.
So if you look at Soundgarden Super Unknown, that comes out in 1994.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was one of the biggest albums of the grunge era. And it does fizzle out after that. But at that point in 94, Nirvana was already essentially on hiatus. So you have these other guys coming around. Pearl Jam overtakes them. Does Pearl Jam overtake them if they didn't have that hiatus? If Nirvana kept making music consistently like Pearl Jam were doing at the time? I don't know. Could they carry that grunge era through? I think it was probably at a point where these other bands were starting to get the like in a horse race. They were starting to slow down, and you have these other guys coming in. Stone Temple Pilots were going for a long time, and then you've got the creation of these super groups later on as well, like Audio
Slave, yeah.
So
Velvet Revolver.
Yeah.
Oh, that was such a good one.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point, Aaron.
It becomes slightly different music over time as well, because I'm not sure how much you would call Velvet Revolver grunge. It seems like at that point they had already, if you're creating super groups, then it's already sort of the end of that era for me.
You know, something
Fair
I would
point.
say
That's a fair
is
point.
that I compare looking at Nirvana next to Pearl Jam. I kind of think of like the Beatles next to the Rolling Stones. You know, the Beatles came out, they were hard, they were the biggest thing, not hard. They were the biggest thing on earth.
Oh, they were hard, all right.
And they probably were some if they had that many people yelling for them, you know. I mean, I'm sure there were moments.
How you get hard for Yoko, I have no idea.
Ooh.
I don't know either. But hey, you know, to each their own.
Words. I can't hear you, Aaron.
But what I'm saying is like when you put the Beatles next to the Stones, you're looking at a band who was a massive flash versus the Stones, who are a slow burn, who legit 30 days ago put out a new single that is great and like fits on modern radio. It's a good song. And it's that way when you look at Nirvana and Pearl Jam. You got this band that was there for like 4 years, which is about how long the Beatles toured. You know, I mean, the Beatles touring stage was like ended in like what, 66, 7, somewhere in there, where the Stones carried on for 50 years. But we've got that with Nirvana and with Pearl Jam. You know, Nirvana, huge, larger than life. But the big flash, where Pearl Jam is still touring and still selling out stadiums around the world to this day. Like it's interesting to compare
and have done their solo projects and
and I imagine they'll be doing it at 80 years old, just like the Stones are. If I had to guess.
Did you hear Eddie Vedder's ukulele album?
I have not heard it. It's what?
It's atrocious. You don't need to.
Okay, thanks.
So
you know, that would have got definitely would have got the 3-song listen courtesy, but that would have been it.
Yes,
so
yes.
Save me that at least.
Courtesy.
Yeah.
So here you go. If Kurt Cobain didn't die, would he have done his own ukulele album?
No.
Oh, it hurts. That's so bad.
I mean, he said in his suicide note, it's better to burn out than, what was it? Burn out than fade away, right?
Then fade away. I don't know. You know, that's the thing. It's not wrong. You know, here's one for you. You know, we
I don't know. Let's see here. What do we got?
I would find the
note for Francis. I love you. I love you. I love you. Oh man.
Now, notice in this note, if you scroll down, Shane.
Sure.
The only thing that is in caps is I love you, right?
Right.
Now, you could attribute that to him trying to say how much he loved Courtney and Francis, or you could look at any one of Duff McKagan's notes or his handwriting, and you will see that it's always in caps. Now, this is getting into a completely different topic. We're talking about what if Kurt Cobain didn't die, but
right. But
what happened? What happened? What were the circumstances around his death? So, as far as we know, Guns N' Roses bassist Duff McKagan was the last person to see Kurt Cobain alive. They were on a plane together, right?
I'm going to stop sharing this for a minute.
Went to Seattle, and according to McKagan, the last time he saw Kurt was when Kurt was at the baggage claim in Seattle, and he said, "I'm going out for a cigarette," and then he just never came back. Now, they were both junkies at the time, and it's hard to believe that they would be together on a plane and not go out, score some dope, and hang out, right? So it's possible that Duff McKagan was with Kurt Cobain in that
beyond the airport,
in that greenhouse or the back shed or whatever it was in his Seattle home, in Kurt's Seattle home where they found him, the guest house maybe.
Yeah.
So if you look at Duff McKagan's handwriting, it's always in caps. So it's
so that possible. I love you jumps out at you.
Yeah, so it's possible that he freaked out. Kurt OD'd. He freaked out, and then he took the note that Kurt was writing to apologize to his fans that he wasn't going to be on the rest of the tour or Lollapalooza or whatever festival, whatever he was doing at that time, and that he turned it into a suicide note and finished it for him. It's a crazy theory. It has never been. There are a lot of theories.
To be clear, you are not saying you think Duff McKagan killed him. You're saying you think Duff McKagan might have been present and covered up the OD.
Correct.
Okay.
Or freaked out or panicked.
Freaked out. I mean, it's possible. I think there's a lot of assumptions that have to take place to get from A to B here. I don't know enough on this. Has anyone ever spoken to this before? Like the idea that that's a possibility, or?
As far as I know, this is a brand new theory.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, you brought it to my attention, especially, Aaron. So it was kind of interesting. It was like, what?
I would love to have been like a fly on that plane and listen to the conversation those two guys would have, because there was friction there already between those bands. Now, and I'm not meaning that in relation to what we were just talking about, but I mean, like, there was some Guns N' Roses Nirvana friction at one point, I believe, in, you know, probably MTV instigated, if I had to guess at the time. But it was interesting. You are talking about, you know, two far gone addicts at the time.
And how did they end up sitting next to each other on a plane to Seattle from LA, I guess it was?
I don't know. How did Tom Segura wind up sitting next to Mike Tyson and wind up with him at his concert that night? It's one of the weird things that happens in the airline.
Could be a coincidence. So picture this, right? You're Duff McKagan. You're hanging out with Kurt Cobain. He ODs. What do? Do you want to be known as the guy who was with Kurt Cobain, like when he OD'd, or like, do you want people to ask questions like, who was the one who got the heroin? Like, you know, like, is it his fault?
I don't believe a person who was in the throes of addiction and arguably probably freshly blasted at that point after getting off an international flight as a heroin addict, I don't believe the wherewithal would have been there to orchestrate a cover-up. I think
you don't think that thought process could have taken place, right?
I don't think he would have been capable. What I'm saying is also that, you know, as a guy who has overdosed before in his life as a young man, there's one thing that everyone around you does, and that is run like hell from you and leave you exactly where you are. I've had a couple friends go that way, and my gut tells me that's probably what would happen. I don't feel like it's the case, but it's an interesting thread to tug on.
It's an interesting one because Duff McKagan seems like such a great guy.
He is. I believe that. He's really interesting. If you've never read his book, It's So Easy and Other Lies, it's an amazing book telling about his tales of addiction and kind of what he went through. I know a fella who I interviewed years ago and have talked to over the years, Matt Bradley. He was on The Deadliest Catch, but he's a friend of Duff's and has talked a little bit with me before about, you know, just what a pretty generally average, nice guy he is. Like, you know, you don't know he's necessarily a rockstar, but of course we're talking about sober Duff. We're not talking about anything else. And I'm not saying I have any suspicions, because I personally, I really don't. And I think it would take so many things to go absolutely right for that to have happened. But it is interesting.
It's possible. People make 180-degree turns in sobriety.
What I'm curious about, and there is something you mentioned to me when we were discussing doing this, that is something I had just never ever considered, is let's talk about that Rome overdose of Kurt's.
Yeah, it seems like he was never the same person after he overdosed in Rome. So he overdosed in Rome in March of '94, and then he died in April of '94. And I read the biography, generally seen to be like the most authoritative biography on Kurt Cobain, Heavier Than Heaven.
Yeah.
According to his acquaintances at the time, like people that Kurt was seeing, he was not the same person after that overdose. So it's a question of whether he even had the mental capacity after that to continue on with Nirvana, whether he had the artistic capacity. I'm not sure he could even pick up a guitar after that point. Like, he was brain dead for like at least 20 minutes after that overdose in Rome.
Interesting. Wow. So, I mean, how has that affected, his creative boom? It's such an interesting, again, I hate to say it, but thread to pull on in this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously he was still there enough. I mean, we're not talking about a guy who can't communicate, but trauma and extreme incidents like that can affect a person's, not just their motor abilities, their intellectual abilities, but also their creative abilities. Some people make great music from trauma.
What else happened to his brain though during that overdose? Were there reports of any mini strokes or anything to that effect?
Question.
It's certainly possible.
I don't know. It's something that would have to be investigated, but
I mean, when you're talking about a what if situation, like that kind of just shows that like he was already on that path, so it's like it just makes you realize how inevitable that he was going to die, because he had already gone through that overdose. If he hadn't done that, maybe the next rehab that he did would have been successful, and he could have started that path to sobriety, and he would have lived until now. We don't know,
right.
But the fact that happened is like, well, what if he didn't overdose in Rome? Is maybe a better question than what would happen. What happens if Kurt Cobain doesn't die? Because it seems like at that point it was so inevitable. So then you have to go back and you have to say, so what if Kurt never picked up heroin? You
could rabbit hole backwards the what ifs 100%.
So far. But, and I would say something else worth looking at is that suicides after overdoses and among drug addicts are not, something that takes a big stretch of the imagination to fully wrap up. No. Anything that messes with, how your brain processes emotion, how it processes thought, things like that can lead to interesting things that are not always great.
Now, okay, so here's a question. If Nirvana was already like on a downward trend, I mean, if there was infighting within the band, if Dave Grohl went and did his own thing, would Kurt have created a supergroup of his own? Would he have gone solo?
Well,
if Nirvana was no longer in the picture, what was the next step for him?
Oh.
Well, it kind of goes back to that what if he had gotten sober.
Yeah.
That led me to what would be the direction he would have took after he was sober. I don't know.
I think
maybe
Kurt Cobain
he went to that and screwed with the pedals and the electronic stuff, and that way.
And he named it something like Les Claypool's Flying Frog Brigade. I absolutely think it would have had a name like something Claypool would have done.
Imagine Kurt and Les Claypool together.
I was just gonna say that would be a pairing I would pay to see.
Kurt Cobain's cartwheeling chimpanzees or something.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
It seems like he was at a point where he couldn't take the fame anymore, right? Like Nirvana was way too big for what he could handle. I mean, the same thing happened with
what he wanted.
And I mean, yeah, it's the same trope as like any kind of rock star. It's like, hey, I have everything I want. Why am I still so unhappy? Same thing happened with John Frusciante from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's like once they got to a certain level of fame, he just couldn't take it anymore, and he quit the band and he went off on his own, did his solo thing, came out with several like avant-garde experimental albums. Which I was a big fan of.
And you've turned us on to some of that. I know, and I love that. It's some really good stuff. Yeah,
and it was just for the art. Like he didn't want to play stadiums anymore. He didn't want to do the interviews. He didn't want to be in the spotlight. He just went. He I guess sort of became a recluse and just focused on his art. And I'm wondering,
just wanted to make music.
Just purely for the music. So I'm wondering if Kurt had that opportunity, if he did back out of Nirvana or it just ended for whatever reason, if he would be able to take a couple of years and just recenter and then get back to the music and just start messing with yeah, who knows what? He said he wanted to get into synths and stuff. Maybe he gets into that
Middle Eastern guitar.
And we had a couple planned questions for us all to discuss too. Going back to Dave Grohl now. Would the Foo Fighters still exist, or would Dave Grohl have lived as the background drummer the whole time? And there's a follow-up to this too I'll pose, but me personally, I don't think he would have lived as the background drummer the whole time.
I don't either. I think Grohl would have wound up. I think the bare minimum Grohl would have done was be an amazing studio musician that played with everybody. But the truth is,
to further the question, then, since we've had a little say on that, if he would have had the opportunity to do his other side projects or from Foo, would he have had the opportunity if he had just lived as a background drummer, if Nirvana didn't die? Studio City, Foo Fighters, Probot,
question.
On and on. These are all things. Them crooked vultures, there's, to me, that's like playing with a hero. You're playing with John Paul Jones. So did Dave Grohl have had those opportunities presented to him if Nirvana had stayed together and Kurt didn't die?
Ooh. I think he would have gone on in some musical capacity that would have made an impact for future generations. Right. I will say that. I can't say that it would have been the Foo Fighters, because I know a lot of that Foo Fighters music was written post Kurt's death. He was dealing with the pain of losing a friend, a bandmate who he'd been working with for years, living with, traveling with. Now, with that said, it's a good point about other opportunities that have come for him over the years. It was a running joke in the 90s when you'd watch MTV. There was a point, I don't remember what year, I'm going to say somewhere between 96, 99, where at one point Dave was in 7 of the top 10 music videos. He just made a thing of hopping in other people's music videos. Suddenly he's done a song with Puff Daddy at the time. So I think Dave would have gone on for cool things. I believe, I genuinely believe that there's a certain amount of destiny that plays a role, and that Dave Grohl was destined and had the tools required to not just be a great rock and roll drummer, but to also be arguably the best rock and roll frontman in 25 years.
Well, and not just that. I mean, Studio City, aside from the music produced from it, his direction of the film, and I believe I'm correct on the direction of the film, was really good, man.
And he bought the new console that was in it.
They freaking rebuilt it in his studio. Took the whole. It's amazing. If anyone hasn't seen that, go see it.
You don't have to be a Foo Fighters fan to like Dave Grohl, in my opinion. I am a Foo Fighters fan. I've seen the Foos a few times. Every time it's an absolute party. It's a blast. It's a great rock and roll show, even in gigantic venues that aren't as personal as some others. It's still a great time. And honestly, that's something Kurt didn't necessarily have. A great time wasn't what Kurt was there to bring you when you saw Nirvana. Now, what I will say is, Shane Brisson, you're the only one of us who ever saw Nirvana live.
Oh, shit.
No, I did not.
You didn't? I thought you did.
No, I did not get to see Nirvana live.
Oh, that's sad.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Did we have a discussion about this recently where you thought you did, but it turns out you didn't?
No, it wasn't them. I think it was somebody else.
I kept thinking like Nirvana and Sonic Youth or something, or I can't remember.
Oh, was it Dead Milk? Wasn't it Dead Milkman?
It might have been the Dead Milkman. Also a cool show, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah, because the last thing I remember talking with Aaron about was Circle Jerks when he went to see the NoFX show, which the Circle Jerks weren't coming when they played here. They weren't coming. The Circle Jerks.
Oh yeah, in for the NoFX final tour, they didn't tour in St. Pete.
No.
Oh shit, that's a shame.
Yeah,
but you still
that wasn't me, dude. I did not get to see them live, so I wonder who that conversation was with.
Somewhere I have a friend who did see Nirvana, and I can't remember who it was.
Well, you can.
I know people who saw them here in St. Louis at Mississippi Nights, which was an old club down right on the Mississippi River. I mean, like there's cobblestone that comes up out of the water, and there's bars built on that cobblestone. And Mississippi Nights was down there, and and it was a shitty club that brought in great bands and good times and lots of great memories for a number of years. There's a recent book out on it that I haven't picked up yet, but I have seen pictures of Nirvana playing there in a couple different eras, I want to say. So they must have been there a few times. But yeah, I never saw him. I've seen Grohl, and I guess Pat Smear, because Pat plays with Dave still. It's another interesting thing. I've really got one more question I'd love to ask before we wrap this up and call it a night. We look at Nirvana through sort of rose-colored glasses in a way. I'm not knocking what they've done, but what I want to say is that when someone dies, when such a massively influential person dies in such a tragic way, and so suddenly there's this thing that's built around them, and it creates this powerful web of influence among young bands and bands to come over the next 20 years. If Kurt doesn't die, how do you think the influence of Nirvana over music from there forward changes?
It's not the same.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not the same influence. I mean, okay, so if Smells Like Teen Spirit comes on the radio, or I'm listening to it on my playlist, I still get the same feeling every single time. I get goosebumps. I sing along to it. You know, I don't get that with some of the other songs that I've heard a million times. You know, I don't get that from Under the Bridge. I don't get it from, Welcome to the Jungle. I get it from Smells Like Teen Spirit every single time. So that can't be understated.
Agreed.
That's never going to go away, whether they're touring in 2023 or, whether Kurt dies in 94. But the influence, he did die at the height of his fame, and that has to be a factor.
Yeah, because I feel like the key there is that, do we overinflate the influence they had when they were active in the light of someone having died? And I don't say that lightly, because I do believe Nirvana.
Let me pose a different question. Did the influence solely come from Kurt, or did that come from the grunge scene overall? Because not only did you have Kurt, you had Soundgarden,
Pearl Jam, Temple
Pearl
of God,
Jam, STP,
Mudhoney's, the Melvins, Alice in
yeah.
Chains.
So that was a lot of like cool mashed up sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were at the forefront, and there was a reason for that because all the other bands were around, and it's so funny because like pretty much everybody who's been interviewed around Nirvana said they didn't think they were going to make it. Right. Whether it was a record producer, whether it was like fans in Aberdeen or Seattle, like they were like, yeah, they were just another one in the scene. It was just, and they didn't see them as any better, maybe even one of the lower tiers, like in that whole scene as it was coming up. But there was this X factor that they had that just like skyrocketed them to where they were. So
yeah,
I don't think you can overstate Nirvana's influence in the grunge scene overall.
No,
I agree. I would also say something, and I'm just going to step on this pedestal for a moment, but something we often don't talk about with relation to grunge is the fact that we never acknowledged that Soundgarden was on MTV like 2.5 years before Nirvana. Their early albums, Ultra Mega OK, Louder Than Love, those are Louder Than Love. One of those. It's something in that vein. I can't remember. It's a great album, but I've got it mixed up in my head. That there were music videos for those songs before Nirvana ever signed a deal. I mean, they were on MTV. No, they were not huge songs. They were not making an influence. What Nirvana and Pearl Jam did came with that exact same type of music and kicked the doors in and said, "Hey, here we are, bitches. Like it or leave."
Right.
And I think that's the big role that Nirvana played. Was they didn't just come in and do it; they came in and did it in a way that made that impact. And it's the Teen Spirit song, it's the video, it's the attitude they had, it's the way they
used angst to their advantage.
They induced angst. Yes.
Yeah.
Like it or not, voice of a generation.
100%.
I agree.
And partially, a couple generations, because that was, even for me, I'm the older dude here. It was like, hell yeah. It was, I can agree with that.
It does span several generations because, like, growing up, like as a teenager, as an angsty teenager, I found Nirvana on my own, and I felt the same way that I'm sure everybody did when it was coming out on MTV for the first time.
Right.
I was
and I really appreciated Bleach. Finding it after, I think I found that after the other one. Sorry, Jen's name. Yeah, I found that after, and it's just like, holy crap, man, this is awesome. Songs like Floyd the Barber. I'm like, okay, you named a song after a character on the Andy Griffith show.
Yeah,
and it's great.
It is great.
It's great. The lyrics in it are nuts, and it's
so working backwards sometimes from bands is just a fun thing. Soundgarden, Corey, I was introduced to them before Nirvana.
Big Dumb Sex was the song. I won't get into the lyrics here because we'll probably get kicked off YouTube, but it's such a great song. It's such a great song. And I think Aaron summed it up well, but Nirvana just did something different. I still remember the first time I heard Nevermind. Like, I think I had heard Teen Spirit once in passing, but I remember being at my friend's house, Seth and Josh Howard in Sykeston. Seth lived maybe 3 more years. He died as a young teenager. But I remember being over at their house. We'd been out skating because that's what little shithead 12-year-olds did in the early 90s. And I remember us going in there, and I had this little like pastel blue Memorex tape deck. It had like louvers across the speakers. It was really cheesy. Sounded like garbage, but it looked cool. It looked very late 80s. And he had Nevermind. and we socked it in their bedroom. And I remember us jumping up and down on beds, bouncing off walls, and moshing in a little like 8x12 bedroom to that album. The first time I ever heard it, and I don't hear it without thinking of my old friend from being a teenager. Still got this.
See, there you go. It gives Aaron.
Hey, like territorial pissings will still just amp me up. If I crank it up in the car, I'm like, yeah, I want to hit a mosh pit.
Limp Bizkit Don't Know a Fight Song. That was a fight song.
That was a fight song.
Oh my God. Well, guys, thanks so much. It's been an absolute blast to sit down here together and chat about all this today. It's been a lot of fun. I think we accomplished absolutely nothing other than enjoying ourselves, having a cold drink, and talking rock and roll for a few hours. To everyone watching, we hope you'll be back and enjoy us again next time. In the meantime, visit the website, read an article or two, share them out, help us. We need it, man. We're brand new. We're out here with no money. We're just doing this because we fucking love rock and roll, and that's kind of who we are. So check us out on social, whatever we can do. We're always interested to hear more. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what could have happened if the tables turned and Kurt lived. So comment away and we'll chime in. And please remember any comments about Duff McKagan to direct those to ARONVAU.
Right here, guys. I can take it. Send me your theories.
The theorists need to talk to you, Aaron.
Hashtag Duff McKagan didn't kill Kurt Cobain. Duff McKagan was there. Hashtag Duff McKagan was there.
Well, guys, thanks so much. We'll be back here.
This is going to be an ongoing series that we're going to be bringing you. So,
yep.
If you have any thoughts on how we can improve, because God knows we can, let us know.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. We have a couple more of these in the hopper, and we're really working hard to get some interesting guests in for them in the future. I don't know yet who it'll be. I'm not going to say anything until we have anyone locked in, but you want to keep watching. It'll be fun. And if you have an idea for a rock and roll what if, hit us up on armchairrockstar.com. Let us know, because we want the ideas, and we will sit here and riff and talk shit on anything we feel like for as long as we want. So have a great week, everybody. Rock on. We'll see you later.